what's going on, family? Listen, we've had a lot of amazing guests on the show, and perhaps you may have never, ever listened to those episodes. So we wanted to present a new segment called SONW Classic, where we go back, we revisit those iconic conversations, and give those full episodes back to you. Sit back and enjoy this week's SONW Classic. Ladies and gentlemen, I have my guy, the one and only Saul Blinkoff, on the show today. How's it going, man?
Hey, how you doing, Shawn? So good to be here, man. So happy to be here.
Listen, I'm excited to get you on the show, man. I stumbled across you on Clubhouse. I was on Clubhouse, and I'm like, yo, who's this guy with this amazing storytelling capability? I start tapping on your bio. I'm seeing, Disney, DreamWorks, all these different things that you've worked on. So for our listener right now who is scrolling through all the show notes, clicking on your Instagram bio, take us back to the young Saul growing up. Like, where are you from?
Do, take it back. Boo, doo, boo, boo. We're going back. That's a song from Rocky, by the way, little thing he sings. I'm from Northeast Philadelphia. I grew up on the East Coast. And, look, everyone, it's a great thing to start with. I like that you're asking about where I came from, because all of us are living, our own story. And we need to know that we have the responsibility and the ability to create our own story, and mine begins in Northeast Philly. I was, and then ultimately New York. I really think I grew up mostly in New York because I moved there when I was 8. I came from divorced parents. My mom remarried when I was 8. We moved to New York, Long Island. And when I was in New York, everybody I knew were doctors, lawyers, business people. I didn't know any people in the creative field. And then I went to the movies and I saw the movie E.T. I remember I was 11 years old, and I'm looking up at the screen, and I remember at the end of the movie, I tapped my mom and I'm like, Mom, that's what I want to do someday. And she looks down at me and goes, what, you want to leave planet Earth in a spaceship? And I'm like, no, Mom, I want to be a filmmaker. And like I said, I grew up in New York. I didn't know any filmmakers. I didn't even know that was a job that you could do. All I knew, Shawn, is when I looked up to that screen, it was something I wanted to do. I just had one problem. I had no idea how to do it. So often I meet people and I ask them, what's your goal in life? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And if you don't know what it is you want to do, you don't have that clarity, you don't know where to put your effort. Well, I didn't know how to become a director, a filmmaker. So I go to the library. And some of your listeners who are in their 20s probably have never been to a library because you have what's called the internet. But I grew up in a time, before internet. Yeah, no such thing as Wi-Fi, YouTube. There's no such thing as those things. I go to a building to find information. I find out the director of E.T., Steven Spielberg, made movies every weekend with kids in the neighborhood. So I went and got a film camera, got my twin sister, my brother, a year older, and every weekend I started making movies. I made murder movies, monster movies, a kidnap movie. One movie I tied my sister up to a tree really tight. I remember, Shawn, we go inside to watch the movie, and my mom's like, I love the movie. Now, where's your sister? I'm like, well, she's still tied to the tree. What's wrong? My sister still tells that story. When she was young, she's like, my brother tied me to a tree. But now that, I'm a successful filmmaker, she's like, well, I was once tied to a tree by director Saul Blinkoff. She loves that story now. So, look, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. And then I get to high school. And in high school, somebody came up to me, it's a true story, sophomore year. And they said, well, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? I said, well, I want to be a filmmaker. They said, no, you don't. I'm like, yeah, I do. They said, no, you don't, because if you want to be a filmmaker, you're going to have to move out to Hollywood. And Hollywood is filled with weirdos. They looked at me and said, you don't want to end up a weirdo, do you? And I said, no, I don't want to end up a weirdo. And I'm telling you right then and there, I gave up on my dream of wanting to be a filmmaker because one person told me I would end up a weirdo. Of course, today I do live in Hollywood, and my 4 kids would tell you Daddy is a weirdo, so much for that. But at that point in my life, Shawn, I was so impressionable. And I want all your listeners to take a moment right now and think about those major life decisions you've made or that you want to make in your life. And think about the influences around you and how so often in life we let people decide the trajectory of our story, of our goal, of how we live our lives. We let people, mentors, encourage us, support us. We also allow people to make us feel discouraged. At the end of the day, we need to believe in ourselves that the goal we have is the essence of who we are. And so at that point, I gave up on wanting to be a filmmaker. I was impressionable. My parents said, so what are you going to do? I said, I'll go back to drawing. Because truthfully, Shawn, my first love was drawing. You know, all kids draw. I see another movie that comes out junior year in high school, and it changes everything for me. I saw the movie, The Little Mermaid. And when I saw that movie, you know, it was more than just a princess singing underwater. I saw animation that I just had never seen before. I saw this character animation of Ariel singing part of your world, and she wanted more. And there's one part in that movie I'll never forget. I get goosebumps right now, where she goes, "What's a fire and why does it? What's the word? Burn." And when she says burn, she takes her hands, puts them over her chest, arches her back, closes her eyes, as if when she says burn, she's talking about the fire inside of her. And I remember watching that movie going, wow, I also want to know what's out there in the world. I related to her. And at that moment, I tapped my mom at the end. I remember the credits are rolling. I go, Mom, that's what I want to do someday. And she looks down at me. She's like, what? You want to fall in love with a fish? I'm like, no, Mom. I want to be an animator at Disney. So there I was, Shawn, junior in high school. And Saul knows exactly what he wants to do. My dream was to become a Disney animator because it combined my two passions, my love of drawing and my love of filmmaking, put them together, animation. And plus, I found out that Disney has a studio in Orlando, Florida. I don't have to go out to LA to become a weirdo.
Man, that's a powerful story, man. I think about that. There's so many things we could break down here. I think what's important to take note of is the people who make it in life, who make those huge leaps, who go after their dreams. There's like an insane amount of belief. What would you say to that listener right now who is hearing your story, that is asking themselves, you know, how can they overcome what other people are trying to, you know, put on them for their life? Like what's Saul's advice for somebody who is trying to overcome that and truly find that belief they have in themselves?
I'll tell you a moment in my life where I really was faced with that in the most dramatic way. Okay. So, you know, when I knew I wanted to be a Disney animator, I didn't know how to do it. Okay. I didn't know how to become a Disney animator. So my mom took me on a trip to Disney World. Not my older brother, not my sister. It literally takes me from New York to Florida to Disney World and was walking me around Disney to find out how her son could become a Disney animator. It's a small world boat ride. And I'm like 2, we're getting on the boat. My mom was like, by the way, my son wants to be a Disney animator. Can you help him? It was actually a little embarrassing. Okay. And the lady's like, ma'am, this is a boat ride. You know, we don't hire animators here. But the lady finally says, she's like, look, if you want your son to work at Disney, everybody that works for Disney has to be interviewed at the Disney casting building. And it was 4 minutes away from where we were in Disney World. So we drive to this Disney office building. And there's Peter Pan and Wendy painted on the ceiling. I'm finally there for the interview. The lady's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, my dream is to be a Disney animator. She goes, well, we don't hire those. She walks out, comes back in 2 minutes later, hands me a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, by the way, which was the most important and valuable piece of paper I ever held in my hands, that piece of paper was a list of 8 schools, 8 art schools that Disney recruits their artists from. She said, if you want to be a Disney animator, you need to go to one of these schools. Boom. That was it. That was the equation I was looking for. Well, that's what that piece of paper was. It was the recipe. And basically in my head, Shawn, it was an equation. Saul plus go to one of these 8 schools will equal dream becoming a Disney animator. And for all of you listening who are lucky enough to have a goal, now you need to know how to accomplish it. And I get to one school in Ohio, Columbus College of Art and Design. And I'm walking the halls of this school. And I'm telling you, Shawn, the artwork on the halls, hanging on that wall,
Wow,
was 100 times better than anything I could ever draw. That's for sure. 100 times better. And I felt intimidated. And I remember thinking, why would I want to go to a school where I would be the worst one there? And that's why I chose the school. Because I thought, you know what? If I choose a school like this where I would be the worst one and they're all better than me, then just being in that environment, I'll get better. So I chose the school. And thank God they chose me. And I remember going to school the first week. And they put up a poster, and it said, a representative from the Walt Disney Studios is coming to our school, and they're going to do a presentation for those of you interested in careers at Disney Animation. So, of course, I was interested. And I ended up walking into the auditorium, and it's filled with 750 students, every freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. And the guy from Disney stands on stage. He was one of the original animators from the 50s on Sleeping Beauty, had a big white beard. He was friends with Walt Disney. Incredible. His name was Bill Matthews. And he stands on that stage. He looks out to us, and he says, before I start, let me just see a show of hands. How many of you want to be Disney animators? Every hand went up.
Wow.
750 students in that room. I will never forget it. I see it clearly. And he goes, let me just tell you guys, out of the 750 of you, maybe, just maybe 4 of you will ever work there. That's how competitive it is. And when I heard that guy say, you know what, you guys, I'm going to pick 4 of you maybe out of the next couple of years, I believed in myself. And I will tell you, Shawn, and this is a fact. This is a fact. I was one of the worst artists in the school at that time. Absolutely one of the worst. But nobody, and I mean nobody, was going to outwork me. And I worked really hard and I had a lot of rejection along the way, man. It wasn't easy. I've had a successful career, and the only reason I say it's called successful is because I'm still doing it.
Yep.
And I still love it.
Man, I mean, talk about a movie, right? That's a classic. Listen, Saul, I have to ask you the question. You came on the podcast and gave tremendous value from the storytelling capabilities of just your life and how you got to where you are today. But I have to ask you the question we've asked every single person who's ever been on the show, who's ever been on this podcast. And that is, if you were that person asking yourself the question of the show, school's over, now what? What advice would Saul give?
You know, most people go through life, and if you ask everyone, what's your goal out there? People are going to tell you, my goal in life is to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. But truth is that what makes a person happy may not be what's good for them. Think about how many people there are happy, but they're not doing things that are really good for them or for the world. There's one idea that if you want to wake up every day and go for a life of happiness, your life's going to go ups and downs. But there's another goal that's, I think, even loftier than a goal for happiness. Don't wake up every day and say, what can I do to make myself happy? It's what can I do to bring myself a life of meaning, to have my life matter. And it comes from one thing, the word responsibility. That's it. It's how do I look at the day? Do I wake up and I have the goal that I want to take responsibility for the world? That doesn't mean just responsibility for my family or my friends or my community or my job, but the world. And how do I take responsibility for the world? And here's the tool I want to give your listeners. You see, responsibility is the ability to respond. So waking up every day and saying, how can I make a difference? Figuring out school's over, now what? Wake up and say, where do I have the ability to make a difference, to serve humanity?
Yo, what you think? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I want to know what you learned. So if you wouldn't mind, would you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast on your phone right now? Upload to your Instagram stories, tag me at Shawn Anthony _, and then let me know in that Instagram story what is one thing that you learned. I love hearing from you, my listeners, thought leaders, former or current students all around the world. Let me know, and while you're doing this, go inside the podcast app, subscribe, leave a 5-star review and a 5-star rating. Again, this helps us reach more people. And if you want to be a part of this mission, helping us change the world one person at a time, it makes a massive difference by you leaving a review. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. And remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.